Hello, innovators. I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Dr. Jay Feldman, an osteopathic medical doctor, entrepreneur, content creator, co-founder of the Otter Public Relations, creator of Mentors Collective, a podcast and media outlet. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Thank you again for having me. Super excited to talk to your audience and get in the conversation with you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
What's up, innovators, fellow entrepreneurs? It's good to meet you.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. And so the way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Sure. So good icebreaker for me. I grew up in kind of a crazy home. I used to have 106 animals living in my house at one point, including a baby kangaroo. We had a mini pig. We had prairie dogs. We had a mini horse in my little backyard. So fun way to grow up. The neighbors all used to come over, and my house is like a little free zoo in the neighborhood. So animals are a huge part of who I am and what I love. They're a passion of mine, and something that a lot of people know about me.
That's really cool. And even the kangaroo thing too. Right before the meeting, we're talking about the cute dog that came into your office there.
Are we still here?
Yeah, it's awesome. Animals are a great way to really share compassion and empathy, and just also have that kind of reciprocated in a way.
Yes, total. Couldn't agree more.
What was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
Every 5 years looking back, I feel like a child looking back at who I was. So let's see, 5 years ago today, I would be 24 years old, still in medical school, and kind of a baby in medical school. I wasn't a successful entrepreneur yet. I was still kind of trying to figure things out and play the rat race ball game, see how good I could do in school, and see where that leads me. And I was good at it. I was happy. I was successful in my own rights and regards. But I feel like in the past 5 years, a lot of self-discovery has happened. I've got exposed to other entrepreneurs, other thought leaders, people who are living the life that I didn't know that I wanted to live. And I feel like that's where a lot of people are. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And back then, I was just kind of stuck in the books and trying to figure it out. And over that 5 years, I think it's been the biggest growth phase of my life, including who I'm friends with now, the people and books that I consume and read. Everything has changed. My vision of who I want to be and the life I want to live has completely shifted. And I think that's completely attributed to this community that I've had the privilege of serving and being a part of.
Well, and it's really interesting too because you kind of went from the specialist mindset of being a doctor and working in that one world to expanding not just to be a doctor, an amazing doctor, no less, but having entrepreneurship and having all these different businesses and groups and networking. So you really were able to expand quite a lot, it seemed. Really grow out of your shell.
Yeah, and I don't want to give up medicine. I love medicine, but if you learn how to serve more people at once, which is kind of what business is, you're figuring out how to expand your reach and reach as many people as possible. You learn how to do that first, then anything that you do, anything that you have to offer is just amplified. So that's kind of where I am now.
Exactly. And I think it's really interesting too. Some of the biggest innovations I think we need, such in medical field or even just in other fields as well, is the cross section of different disciplines. So you being able to be a businessman and a doctor, you're going to be able to help many people through your medicine background and through that also funnel or not funnel, megaphone of business, so to speak.
Yeah, and funnels included, but absolutely couldn't agree more.
So, just kind of going into this next question here, too. Your profile says that you want to help people realize their happiness and be unafraid to pursue it. So, what do you do or aim to do in order to help achieve that fantastic goal?
So one of the things that I do is through my podcast, Mentors Collective, and through my business coaching. But essentially, right now, and I'll be completely honest, I'm not trying to be a thought leader right now. That's not where I'm at. Right now, I'm trying to learn and develop the skills as an entrepreneur because, and you've seen it, you've been in this world, all of the people who are quote unquote gurus who haven't started successful businesses, who haven't sold a company for 8 figures, who are trying to give back and tell people what to do. Right now, this phase is about me. It's about becoming a marketing ninja, becoming a business ninja, working on my own personal development, applying all the habits that I like to encourage my friends and family to take on for myself. And, creating effective habits is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a life mission. That's something that I do, that I love to help my friends, family, and close associates to find that happiness, to find their mission, to find what it is that they're going to excel at, and then help them scale it. but I'm not at the stage of my life where I want to do that as a full-time job. Right now, I'm running a multi-million dollar agency. Right now, I'm, running my fitness company. Right now, I'm still studying, still learning medicine, still learning marketing. And I'm looking forward to the time and place where I'm going to explode it and be able to give back on a
Yeah.
full scale.
Well, I love that. And there's a term that came to mind when you were speaking there, multipotentialite, the person who has a potential to do many different things. And it seems like even though you have achieved a lot and you've done a lot, there's still so much more potential in the future for you. And I think that's super exciting.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope so. And that's where I see myself. I've got it all sketched out. I've got a timeline of like the points I want to hit and who I'm going to be, who that persona that I'm going to take on. And I think that was a really important exercise that I did in the last year that a lot of people don't do. Who are you going to be? What is your message going to be? What is your framework going to be? Who are you going to serve and who are you going to give back to?
Mhm.
And how am I going to become that person who is able to give back and give everything to them?
Well, and I resonate with that. My previous endeavor before PolyInnovator here, it's interesting. I felt like I wasn't good enough yet for it. And that wasn't like a harp on myself. It was more of like a self-awareness thing. Like, hey, there's a lot of room for improvement. And if you want to do this well, you're going to have to improve a lot. And that started my self-development journey. So I really resonate with that.
Yeah, it's true. And there's a lot of experts out there that also tell people it doesn't matter how much you know. Your audience is always one step behind you. So as long as you're teaching them what you're learning,
Hmm.
you're going to be able to build an audience and give back. And I do believe that, but I also believe our time is limited, our resources are limited, and there's stages that you should go through because becoming an influencer, a thought leader, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. I was doing it at one point, and I took a step back to say, you know what, my business is suffering due to this. Like my finances are suffering. I would love to not focus on producing so much, but focus on learning and practicing first. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, and it's really interesting. I was talking to someone earlier today about like the ebbs and flows of life and how there are different cycles. Like there's circadian rhythm, for example. Like as you get older, you go from a night owl to an early bird, and sometimes back to a night owl. And it's just interesting how in life too, there's points of input, and there's points of output. And learning is an input, obviously, and then content creation and sharing your knowledge is an output. But there's certain times where you have to go back to the other one and have that balance.
Yeah, and I think it should always be a little bit of both, and that's what it is for me right now too. I'm not outputting. I am.
Yeah,
I've got a very successful podcast. I've
yeah,
got a very successful social media channel, but man, my focus right now is lots of input, and actually practicing what I'm inputting. Not just reading books, not just watching YouTube videos, but I've got coaches for every different aspect of life, and for people, my podcast is called Mentors Collective. I am huge on this topic. And if you don't have mentors, go find them. That's going to be the biggest thing and pay them.
hmm,
I have an ads mentor that I meet with twice a week. I pay him $150 an hour and we just study and practice ads. I'm not just like reading books and watching videos. I'm in there in the ads manager, going through funnels, going through targeting, going through placements with an expert like 4 hours a week.
hmm.
And it's just been exponential for my growth, not just for myself as an entrepreneur, but for my business. And it really, that's how you apply things. That's how you actually get better. It's not
Yeah.
just about reading books. It's not just about listening to podcasts. It's about freaking finding a way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you're creating output right now, being on this show, creating content right now with me. So thank you for spending the time for that output. And it is interesting too. We're both well versed in fitness, and it's like hiring a personal trainer, for example, or I'm a swim coach, or having teach someone how to swim. The significant difference you can make when you have a coach or a mentor that can help you progress farther is just immense.
Yes, I have a fitness coach as well, and I'm well versed in fitness.
Yeah.
I probably don't need a fitness coach to tell me what to do and tell me how to work out. But just the act of having one
Hmm.
there to push me, give
Yeah.
me new exercises, hold me accountable for things, is going to assure that I take my fitness and my health to the next level and stay on top of my goals.
Well, and one thing I think is really interesting to note there is like, yes, we are both well versed in that, but there's certain points where you're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. But when you have someone there to look at you and see what's happening there, be that mentor, like, hey, your wrist is starting to slip, you're not keeping it straight enough, and you're going to have tension there if you keep doing it that way. You might notice it eventually, maybe, but most people won't necessarily. And so having that mentor or coach there help you fix that small situation that'll not compound to something later down the line.
Yeah, 100%. There's that and accountability. Having a third set of eyes on anything that you're doing,
Hmm.
uh, I think is super valuable. I run a PR agency. That's my my main business, and we don't do our own PR. We've got a team of 18 publicists, and we have an outside agency coming in working on our PR and working on the PR for us. Not because we're not adequate, we're very good at what we do, but it's a third set of eyes looking in, and we're learning from them. They're learning from us, and it's just good for accountability and really being able to get as many sets of eyes
Mhm.
and get as many opinions as possible, onto something.
Well, and that's kind of the same ethos of this show too, is having the multidisciplinary, multi eyes. And something I wanted to ask you is, what is the ideology behind the Mentors Collective?
So Mentors Collective, I'll tell you why I started it.
Yeah.
Even before it was a podcast, I was big on coaches and mentors. And I used to schedule weekly calls with my business mentor, with my self-growth mentor, and we would just talk about like where I'm at with in life, where they're at with life, how we can grow and do better business together. And at the end of these calls, I'd be like, that was awesome. Like people would really benefit from just listening to this calls. Like, why isn't it recorded? And that's kind of where Mentors Collective was born. It was all a collective of my mentors, and I just started recording the conversations that I would have been having anyways.
Hmm.
And these are conversations now I have people on. We talk about sales, we talk about generating leads, we talk about email marketing, we talk about personal development, fitness, all the things that are important to me, where I can generally talk to somebody who I look up to as a leader and learn something from them. Now other people have the opportunity to learn from those conversations as well. And it's my job to ask them the questions, not only that I want to hear, but what I think, the audience wants to hear as well. So that's kind of the ideology and how it was born, and that's what I believe in.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's interesting too, because with your podcast or even this podcast too, it's a good opportunity to meet people that you might not have a door with anyways too beforehand. And so like, for example, you and I met, we had a chance to actually connect purely because of this. We might have had a chance down the line, but it's up in the air. But with a recording, we can actually go in and make a connection.
Yeah, it's such a powerful tool. It's one of the best things that I ever did for myself, for my network, and yeah, get to meet people like you and have conversations like this multiple times a week. What's better than that?
Right. And so one thing I was going to ask too, did the specialty collective morph into the mentors collective?
So yeah, something like that. And the Specialty Collective is still live on YouTube. That's where I was interviewing people from different specialties of medicine,
Hmm.
so that people going into residency and medical school could hear from all these different thought points on specialties. I'll be quite frank. Some of them went really well, and I think some of them were not so as helpful as I hoped they would be for the listeners, because I think a lot of the doctors that I was interviewing were not fully transparent about the specialty and about their experience with it. And I had worked in all of these specialties, and what they were saying did not reflect my beliefs on it and my experiences with it.
Hmm.
So some of them, like the anesthesia one I did with Jarrett was awesome. I had a couple really good ones there. But, for anyone who's in medical school looking at residency and you're looking at specialties, that my biggest piece of advice to you is go shadow, go work in that specialty. But yes, that was exactly the idea between specialty and mentors collective.
Well, and it's interesting too because the practice you had with that led into this next one. So you learned the skills ahead of time, and then once you got to something different, something more like what you're wanting to work towards in general, you're able to apply those skills.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that you could say that about everything that we've both done so far, every business that I've ever started, everything has evolved into what we're doing today. And I
Hmm.
don't think this is the end. I think this will eventually evolve into the next thing, and the next one will be even better.
Right.
We're still baby entrepreneurs. We're still baby, podcast hosts. We have so much learning to do and so much growth to do, and it's exciting to think about.
Well, and just to jump on that point real quick, I started doing solo casts for like 42 episodes before I even had the first interview. And now you're like my 81st interview I've done since May.
Wow.
And it's insane. Like, I agree. Like, even after all of that experience, I still feel like I have way more ahead. And I'm super excited to be on this early stage with you as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm excited to be here. 81's a huge accomplishment. I think I'm somewhere in the 40s. And the solo ones I've been trying to do more of. I have so
Hmm.
many like random thoughts in the car. I'll sit in the car and I'll do like
Yeah.
a 10, 15 minute just about like marketing tactics or like lifestyle stuff that I'm thinking about. I actually took it from Russell Brunson, one of my thought leaders that I really look up to. He does marketing in the car. Just like 10, 15-minute segments that are just hearing
Yeah.
him talk about his thoughts and about marketing. It's so powerful.
Well, sometimes you get into that alpha wave state where you feel creative and you have some kind of idea you want to share. Like one day I had this idea of the future of social media, and I just wanted to get it on paper or like on audio, something that I could just say quickly. And that's what inspired the Fireside Micro Polycast, kind of like this little fireside chat, 3 to 9 minutes, like you're saying there. And so, do you think you want to have multiple different formats, like the short form, medium form, long form, like interviews, of course, there too, something like that as well?
Yeah, at least two. One of them being a format like this, 30 to 60 minutes with a guest who I'm learning from. And then my short form as well, 5 to 15 minutes of just me talking about, my thoughts, my insights, stuff that I'm, just learned, any like new marketing tactics or new stuff that I'm working on. For people to just kind of connect with me, just life stories, I think is a really powerful thing too. Doesn't have to be all productive, constructive. Sometimes
Yeah.
people just want to hear you talk about your life.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think podcasts are a great opportunity to do that.
Well, it's interesting too because these interviews go for like an hour to 2 hours sometimes. So it's kind of funny how there's such. I go to take the Joe Rogan approach where like we just go as long as the conversation allows. But it's interesting too because there's an author named Derek Sivers who created this concept of a now page where every month you go in and you update what you're doing personally and professionally because people who follow you are genuinely interested in you. And if you share that this little bit of information each month, it's an interesting delve into your life.
Yeah, I'm with that too. And Russell Brunson also talks about that. And I'm someone who can confirm that that's a real thing. People who are following you, it's not just for your advice, it's not just for your products. They want to connect with you on a personal level. They want to see my dog Moses. They
Yeah.
want to see, what I do day to day in my offices, like what actually happens behind the scenes. And I'll be fair, I don't do a good enough job at documenting that. But every time I do, I get the best response. So that's something that I hope to improve on.
Yeah, it takes time too. It's interesting because as a doctor and content creator and entrepreneur and more, obviously, how do you manage all the balance all your time?
So I think looking at it on like a resume format, like all of the things that I've done and am doing, makes it look really scary. The way that I balance it is segmenting my day to day, so that it makes it manageable. I don't do my my medicine every day. I don't do my Rex Fitness every day. I don't do my mentors every day. Most of my day is spent here in my offices on Otter PR, which is our main company. That's typically like 8 to 9 hours a day. At home, I usually record my podcast at 6 p.m. That's 2 to 3 days a week, whether I'm a guest or I have a guest on my show. And weekends, I work most weekends. I'll work on personal stuff. I'll work on Mentors Collective, building out my media channels, building out Rex Fitness, and all of the other businesses. But I think it's like an Elon Musk thing, and this is a tactic that he talks about, which is working in parallel. So you get something started, you get it into motion, you get people to help you with it, and then you step away and work on the next thing. You work on it, you get people involved, you put some money behind it, you get it into motion, you work on the next thing.
Yeah.
I think if you try to attack everything all at once, it becomes unmanageable and you collapse and eventually you fail. But it's the act of, like Rex Fitness Club. It's a home gym that I sell, and that took me like 3 months of a lot of work. And I dedicated my 5 to 10 o'clock p.m. every day, like 5 days a week for that on
Yeah.
that for several months. Now it's selling. I've got people involved. You got people managing it, and it requires very little intervention. Any service business, I'll just warn anyone that that's going to require the most time and energy, and that's what Otter here is. But that's where we really get to serve people on a really personal level.
Yeah, and it's something that you're really passionate about right now too, anyways. And it is
Yes.
interesting because something I've talked about is macro and micro focus, where what are you doing in kind of this quarterly or monthly time span, but what are you doing on a day to day? Like what is your micro focus? Like what are you doing to segment, like you just said there, and balancing your time? And one thing Elon Musk also talks about too is that if you want to get things done better than your competitors, do more and do it for longer. And like you said, you worked on Rex Fitness for months, several months, like day in day out when it came to just getting that done. But now once it's already set up, it's just kind of letting it be on the continuous path.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that are like that, and there's a lot of things that aren't like that. I have two media channels, mentorscollective.com and installate.com, are now digital media publications. Took a lot of time initially to set up. Now I can back off. But just like any e-com or not e-commerce, but any service company, you're not going to really be able to back off. You back off, the money stops. For e-commerce, for blogging, for things like that, you're able to kind of build and then back off.
Mhm.
So it's really trying to find a balance of those things in your schedule, and knowing what you're getting yourself into is big too.
Well, and that's one reason why I asked that question too, because I think it's a very good point for the show. This is talking about multidisciplinary people and like polymaths or people like yourself too, polymathic and like myself as well. And it's interesting how being able to balance your time, I think it's a very big important key point that you made there. It's like it's not about doing everything at once. It's about putting things on the slow burner. Like you get it started, let it start cooking on its own. Maybe some point some person can help and come in. You can't account for the crazy curveballs in life that can happen to you that can make it significantly different.
Yeah. And not every project that I've started, I've finished. I've had a lot of projects that I've put into motion that eventually I gave up on and they collapsed. I had a medical clothing company called medpup.com.
That's cool.
I did original designs. They were funny, they were clever, and it was a fully live and functional website. I had influencers involved, and quickly realized that selling themed clothes at $4 margins was not going to be worth a lot of my time and marketing dollars and market. So eventually I gave up the website. I stopped working on it and I learned a valuable lesson. I learned how to build an e-commerce store. I learned how to market an e-commerce store, but at the same time, not every project's going to be a winner. I'm sure some of the stuff I'm working on now, I'm not going to be working on 5 years from now, and that's okay too.
Well, and the thing is with failures too, is you learn from them, and like it's interesting how you're able to like the most successful people like yourself there too fail often, and if you can fail often, you can learn how to be more successful, and that's one reason why you probably are successful so much because you might have failed in some kind of test in school or something like that. And you learn from it, and you're able to grow from it.
Yeah, 100%. Failure is, success is great too, but failure is really where you get a lot of the takeaways and get to apply that knowledge to the next thing.
Yeah. And so it was interesting. That question there that I had just asked was about this, the multifaceted life you have, and it really relates to this idea of a polymath. And so I wanted to ask you something I ask all my guests is what is a polymath to you?
So a polymath to me, and I hate when people say, "How do you balance everything that you're doing?" Because they don't see the day to day. A polymath to me is somebody who is multifaceted. It's somebody who, and I'll just get a preface with this. I'm from medicine. The people who I went to medical school with and trained with and worked in the hospitals with are the opposite of a polymath. If a unimath is a thing, and maybe it is, they're all that. It's medicine, 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 hospital, and then like tunnel vision, blindness from everything else going on in the world. For me, polymath is somebody who is not like that. I mean, there's so much opportunity. There's so many categories and layers to what's going on in the universe and in the world, and they interact with each other. My idea of a polymath is somebody who is able to connect the dots. Say, yes, I love medicine, very passionate about medicine, but that's not all there is. If I could learn medicine and entrepreneurship and make that work, and medicine and fitness and connect those dots and fitness and entrepreneurship, you don't need to do all these things at once. But if you're able to just get good at a couple of these areas and get passionate in a couple of these areas and connect those dots, I think that's what a polymath is. It's somebody who sees the world in a certain way and is able to commingle all of the different categories and layers that are going on.
And see, I knew you were going to be a good guest on this show. It's just interesting too because that's one that I was thinking about. Like as a specialist, you come from that specialty background in the medical field. That you would think that medical fields and lawyers, people who are normally perceived as really deep specialists, wouldn't be polymathic. But I've noticed from you or Ali Abdal and other doctors around the world, it's like there is a lot of polymathic potential and talent. And so, as a medical specialist, how might polymathy fit into your life more so than what you've just obviously greatly explained? But just curious to see.
Sure. And to be fully clear, I'm not a specialist. When I hear specialist, I think heart doctor, GI doctor, kidney doctor, lung doctor. And I think those people are actually less polymathic in general. But granted, I have met those who are more polymathic. I worked with orthopedic surgeons who created their own knee implants. They're entrepreneurs in their own regard. They're engineers in their own regard. And I've seen that pay off. For me, as a doctor who also is very interested in obesity medicine and in fitness, I think that's where it really comes into play. And one of my long-term goals, which is, well, it's written on my board, is establish myself as an obesity medicine thought leader. With that, I'm going to use my knowledge of not only the medicine of obesity, the supplementation that goes along with it, the pharmacology, the fitness, the nutrition. These are all subjects that I'm now an expert in, that I hope to fuse together with my marketing knowledge and entrepreneurship knowledge to springboard myself into that thought leader role and help a lot of people with it along the way.
That's exactly why I asked that question. It's interesting too because you made a good point. There is a lot of hyper specialism in medicine, like the cardioid and neurology of it, and all these different areas of the body where people are focusing hyper specially. But there's also like general practitioners who may be more polymathic, and people like you who are taking aspects of other areas of life and bringing it in, and that is very polymathic.
Yes, thank you. Agreed.
And it's interesting too because you write about finance and mental health on your Medium blog, and even and on your YouTube channel too, having more on the Mentors Collective and medicine and a bit of finance on there. How do you explain your multi niche disciplines then as a creator?
So as a creator, it's tough, especially with the model that people are looking at now. They want you to be not a jack of all trades. They want a specific message from you, and they want you to have a framework and create content around only that framework. And that's something that I've struggled with because when I started creating, it was primarily as a medical student, and everything that I would talk about and post about was medical school, how to get into medical school, what happens in medical school. And then a couple years later, I'm not in medical school anymore.
Yeah.
What the hell do you post about? So at that point, it was medical knowledge, medical training. And I realized quickly that's a dangerous road to go on, and had to quickly pivot. And now I'm talking about something that I'm a little bit more passionate about, which is entrepreneurship and business. And the audience that was once used to hearing about medical school doesn't really want to hear about entrepreneurship and business. So that's tough, and that's a good question. So for anyone listening who's looking for my advice on this, it's find something that has long legs, and that's something that we use in PR. A story has long legs; it can go on forever, and that's not something that I did when I was kind of honing in on the medical student niche. I should have probably started on entrepreneurship. So pick a vertical, pick something that you're passionate about, really passionate about, and create your framework and messaging around that. And anytime that I'm giving advice and talking to thought leaders, that's what I'm going to tell them. And that's my plan for myself as well. Like I said, I want to be a thought leader in the obesity health optimization space. That's the content that you're going to be able to start expecting from me, probably 2022. Until then, I'm sure you've noticed I've stepped back from posting. Right now, I'm playing the reporter. Right now, I'm interviewing people that I want to talk to anyways about business, about marketing, so that I can learn and also give that back to people who also might want to learn. But in terms of becoming a thought leader myself and creating content, expect a massive shift around 2022.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I think it goes back to this idea of the specialist mentality too. We live in a society that's all specialist mentality since the Industrial Revolution, and that's also permeated into the content creation space where they're saying you need to niche down, you need to have just one topic, or else
Yeah.
people aren't going to subscribe or you're not going to grow. And sure, the SEO is a very important aspect behind it. Like if you have too many topics, the algorithm won't know where to put you. But there are plenty of YouTube channels out there that have tons of different topics and wide ranging. Like Mr. Beast, all his videos are pretty much random at this point, and it's like
Yeah.
he's still successful at it, but he's able to be successful through other means such as click through rate and good thumbnails and good titles, that kind of thing. And it's interesting how people like us who are multi niche and have multiple different topics to talk about and delve into, I don't think that's going to be a hindrance to us. Sure, it's hard. Like it definitely has been hard for both of us in the past, but I think that if people follow your channel, not just because of the information you provide, but because of you. And you're obviously a very interesting person, so people are going to be coming on there for your mentality, for your energy, for your overall demeanor. And so, like, if someone's going to unfollow you because you're no longer doing medical stuff, that's fine. But I think a majority of people are going to stay because they like who you are and want to learn whatever your journey is next.
Sure. And talking like a lifestyle channel. They want to follow me to see what I'm up to, see where I'm traveling to, see my dog. And yeah, that's absolutely an approach that you can take. And just the people that I follow and consume and learn from, so that people, you want to build a community around people who are looking to you as a leader and want information from you. So yes, I agree with you. People will follow me just because I'm interesting and I travel and I've got animals and I give advice here and there. Uh, but I do strongly believe that in order to really springboard into a community, you need to have a framework, you need to have a specific message. And it's unfortunate because there are so many things that I love and love to talk about, and I'll always work those in.
Yeah.
If I'm ever building a brand around myself in the obesity health optimization niche, I'll still talk about marketing because it's something that I love to do. I'll still talk about business. It's something I love to do. Still talk about animals. But my bio, you better believe, is going to say, obesity health optimization specialist, physician awarded in X, Y, and Z. When they're coming to me, that's what they're gonna see and stick to, hopefully.
Mhm.
But like I said, we're still babies. We're still
Yeah.
figuring this out, which is fun.
Well, and I'm looking at your YouTube right now too, and it is like your personal brand. You have the Mentors Collective there, which is your current phase, and it has your personal brand of J. Feldman, Dr. J. Feldman. And it's interesting too because I approach PolyInnovator in this idea phases, like considering like we talked about the focus earlier. What are you working on now? What can you work on next? And so the next phase you said is going to be more around the medical stuff that you're talking about in 2022, and that kind of thing. And so right now it's Mentors Collective, and that might slow down a little bit when you move on to the next topic. But even still, it's still your channel. People are going to grow with you, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I named Mentors Collective also pretty strategically because it could apply to a lot of things. I mean, it's just mentorship. It doesn't mentorship in what though? Uh, I think people who are looking at that, and right now it's called on my podcast list, Mentors Collective Entrepreneurs,
Mm,
just for people to like find and search it,
yeah.
but easily changeable. But I'll probably stick to that with mentors and then probably start another podcast at some point for obesity and health using everything that I learned through Mentors Collective. It's
Yeah.
also on my list of things to do. Yeah.
That's really cool. And thank you for the audio feedback so that way people can search for it because sometimes it's hard to find names. It seems to be like there's still this dissonance on searching for podcasts or podcasts. Like if you go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and search for something, it's not very adequate when it comes to finding certain shows.
Yeah, and I found that as a challenge to growing a podcast, especially a lot of people who are podcast listeners already have like the 6 to 8 shows they're already listening to.
Mhm.
So getting in front of those people has become an interesting marketing challenge and fun thing to do. But it's, we're learning, it's growing, it's working. But you're right, the search function is tough. If you don't have enough reviews, if you don't have enough trigger keywords in there, and if you don't have a good profile picture,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get those clicks.
So, what is the story behind Otter PR and how does it inspire you?
Sure. So Otter PR is my PR agency. We do full service media. We've got a team of 26 now, which is kind of
Wow.
crazy here in the offices now. Most of us being publicists and writing staff, and obviously our core team of marketers and VPs. But it kind of came out of necessity as a digital marketer when I was going through medical school, was running a 7-figure digital marketing company, working mostly on Instagram and ads,
Hmm.
and was trying to establish myself as a thought leader through PR, which is essentially any form of getting you into the media, podcasts, TV, online publications like Forbes Entrepreneur. These were all things I was trying to figure out for myself, for my company, for my brand. Hired a publicist, and it was a huge failure. It was on a 3 month commitment. I was paying him like $5,000 a month, and it was just a nightmare. Absolutely nothing happened. So from there, marketing agency took a nosedive when Instagram updated their algorithm, made it really hard to market on there. So we pivoted really quickly since we were already working with a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs, and this is something that I had kind of been exposed to. So built Otter PR around that with a unique offer. We don't do any long-term commitments, and we make this affordable for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And our specialty is helping thought leaders become thought leaders. So practiced a lot of this same techniques on myself, my partner, and my friends' companies, and eventually built this monster in only a year. And it's been an absolutely wild journey. We've helped clients get coverage in almost every American speaking country. We're on TV every week. We work closely with journalists at New York Times, with Forbes, and primarily I get to work with the people who I've always wanted to work with, who are thought leaders. It makes up about 60% of our clientele. I help them get booked on podcasts like mine and yours. I help them get onto TV. I help them get into entrepreneur.com, Forbes, and it's just been a blast.
Yeah.
And we help people with verification and all the other stuff they're interested in as well. But we've grown from 2 to 30 over the pandemic. We've,
It's
sorry, that's my golden doodle barking. He's got a lot of friends in the office. And yeah, we're now doing multi 7 figures, and it's just been an awesome experience.
no, and that's really cool. And speaking of verification, what do you think not what do you know it takes to get verified?
So I do a whole webinar series on this, but I'll give
Okay.
you like the 2 minute breakdown and what it takes to get verified. And I'll talk specifically about Instagram because that's the hardest platform to get verified on and the most strict. I did get verified about a year ago. It was quite a bit of a process, and it's changed a lot since then, and it continues to change and get harder. So what they're looking for when you apply for verification, And there's two ways to apply. There's one right natively on your phone where you can click the apply for verification button. And the other one is through a media portal. Those media portals are assigned to agencies that manage actors, athletes, singers, artists, people who need to get verified quickly because they're about to get a big break or having a big break. Now you can pay for access to these media portals, these back end portals into Facebook, and that's where the best results happen, and that's what we do for our clients.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
when you submit what they're looking for, they're going to throw your name into Google News and see what really pops up and what kind of media coverage qualifies. They're looking for top tier media coverage and feature articles specifically. In obviously, if you have outlets like Forbes and Entrepreneur and Inc., that's great. But a lot of other media coverage qualifies too. But a feature article is really when your name is in the title, it's a picture of you, and that article is about you and why you are unique and special and hot, and there's a buzz around you. And typically the magic number's around 10 qualifying articles, and you can pay for that press. It does get expensive, but the best way to always do it is the organic way, working with a publicist to get that organic coverage, get into TV, get into top tier outlets, and then work with an agency like us to submit you.
That's really interesting. And that's why I was curious about it, because I've wondered about PR. Because it's one of the few things I have not looked into when it comes to marketing and thought leadership is like, how do I get into Forbes or Inc. and all these different outlets online? But there's also the new TV anchors and stuff like that as well. So that's very interesting. And so, how does PR come into the entrepreneurial life, do you say?
Sure. As an entrepreneur, all of us are selling something,
Yeah.
whether it be a product or a service, and we probably have competition. PR comes into play in a couple of important ways. One, it's a way to drive more traffic, get powerful backlinks to increase your SEO. And two, it's a way to increase your authority in whatever space you're in, increase your credibility. And people want to work with people who are in the media, and people want to work with people with good reviews and testimonials. And media coverage is the ultimate form of a review. It's a third party saying, a credible third party saying, this guy is legit, he's trustworthy, he does good work, and you should want to work with him.
Hmm.
And we've noticed, and this is a different package that we sell, just by advertising that you've been in Forbes and Entrepreneur and Yahoo on your website and your social medias, your conversions go way up and people want to work with you more. So I think it's something that everybody should utilize, at least in some form or another.
Yeah, even if you're not an entrepreneur, or even if you're just a content creator too, just having some kind of testimonial or having that customer feedback kind of thing, it's just really interesting too. To think about like how could you become a thought leader in the modern age? Because we're talking about just specialists in polymaths and all these different types of people, and it's just a very interesting concept. I almost think of like the idea of a polymath PR kind of way. Like how can you relate yourself to the public as a polymathic person? Because a lot of people can't define themselves as a polymath, and so that's one thing I was really curious about there.
Yeah, and I actually like what you're doing, kind of putting a title to it. Because like when people ask me what I do, I mean, I typically say, doctor or entrepreneur, but
Hmm.
we're really so much more than that. But
Yeah.
people either don't want to hear it or they get confused when you start saying I'm all these things. So being able to say that I'm a polymath or even say that to the media, because when you're getting media coverage, you're not like he's this, 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 and this. They usually focus on one thing and harp on that, and that's what they want to hear too. And I think that's what people want to hear. And this is not a commonly discussed topic.
Yeah.
Is there an adjective, polymathism?
Yeah, polymathy.
Polymathy. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because that's why I take do the shows. I can exemplify all those different areas of life because most shows don't do that. They just focus on one, like you're saying. And I think that's we're naturally more generalistic anyways. That's one reason why they're talking about some new studies came out about how the old humans, like the Homo sapiens, when they first kind of evolved into it, they were able to succeed versus the Homo erectus and some of the other ones because they were able to be more of a generalist and do more different things. And I think it's very interesting how it's inherent in our life, and yet we've been kind of pushing that down. And so we're getting close to wrapping up here, but I just wanted to ask you too, what do you think it takes to really define yourself in your own view? Like, how do you want people to see you?
So that's a tough one too. And like we spoke about earlier, because I know people want to interpret us in a singular way. They don't want to look at you as multifaceted, and people don't like hearing that somebody is multifaceted. When I was on interviews for residency, I would hide it. I would hide it from the world. So the way that I want people to see me and the way people want to see me are two very different things. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. And I think it depends on the situation that you're in. If you're trying to get a job, if you're trying to get into residency, you have to know that as humans right now in society, people want to interpret you singularly in one
Mhm.
uniform way. They don't want to see you, in all these different lights. But how I want people to interpret me is somebody that cares about my customer, about who I'm serving, and somebody that can do a lot of perform a lot of different functions and be a lot of different roles, wear a lot of hats, and have multiple interests. And that applies to me in every facet of life, both my hobbies, my work, my personality.
Yeah.
I'm very multifaceted, and it's difficult to convey that to people in a way that elicits a good response. So sorry if that's a confusing answer, but I think that's kind of the theme to this show
Mhm.
is polymathy is something that is relatively newer and harder to generally accept by people when talking to certain people, especially uniform singular people. When you're talking to somebody who is singular minded, I think
Mhm.
it's very hard to get who you are across to them and for them to reciprocate and like you. So that's a challenge that I faced, that I'm sure you faced, and for all the polymaths out there, something to keep in mind. But when I'm talking to somebody like yourself, I see you for all the amazing things that you're doing. I appreciate you for all of the different uh, points you have to your character, all of your different layers. And I respect it and admire it because I know that you can reciprocate and see the same thing in people like myself.
Yeah, and I will say it wasn't really confusing. You explained it well, and I will say too, one of the reasons why people think that it's a negative thing is that jack of all trades is often what people think of. They're like, okay, jack of all trades, master of none, but that's not the
Yes.
full saying. The full saying continues, but also sometimes better than a master of one, and that chunk got cut off. I think probably just the marketing thing basically there, where people are like, okay, if you're jack of all trades, if you're doing too many things, you're not focusing too much on one, and that's a negative. But sometimes, like you were mentioning earlier, if you can bring in the entrepreneurship with the medical field, with your fitness background for obesity as well, all these things coming together is better than just being a master of one because you're able to go synergize and create a new outcome that way.
Yes, I agree. At the same time, though, and I'm going to leave you with this one.
Mhm.
I think it's beneficial for us as entrepreneurs to be a jack of all trades. It's better for us to know a little about a lot. And I don't want to say a little because I know, I feel like we both know a lot about a lot. But if I'm hiring somebody and if someone is coming to me looking for a job and they are highly specialized in one thing that I'm hiring them for, whether it be graphic design or video editing, I would almost prefer them to not be a jack of all trades. But that is the employee employer entrepreneur versus nine to fiver kind of
Dichotomy there. Yeah.
dichotomy. And I
Yeah.
think that's super relevant as well.
Well, this is definitely tangent bait. We can totally talk about it another day. What could be the call to action for the audience today? Because I know you got to go.
Yeah, so call to action, guys. Please connect with me. If you saw me on the show, the best way to reach me is going to be Instagram, at Dr. J. Feldman on Instagram. And I hope you check out my podcast as well. It's Mentors Collective Entrepreneurship. If you type that in, Mentors Collective should work. Check that out. Shoot me a message letting me know you are, and I'm guaranteed to respond if you say you saw me here. So thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Well, and it's funny because I was about to ask where can people find you. I'll have links in the description for you anyways. It was great to have you. Once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and this is Dr. J. Feldman on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, everyone listening.